The elements of crime. It is generally agreed that the essential ingredients of any crime are 1. A voluntary act or omission, actus reus, accompanied by 2. A certain state of mind, mens rea. An act may be any kind of voluntary human behavior. Movements made in an epileptic seizure are not acts, nor are movements made by a somnambulist before awakening, even if they result in the death of another person. Criminal liability for the result also requires that the harm done must have been caused by the accused. The test of causal relationship between conduct and result is that the event would not have happened the same way without direct participation of the offender. Criminal liability may also be predicated on a failure to act and the accused was under a legal duty to act and was reasonably capable of doing so. The legal duty to act may be imposed directly by statute, such as the requirement to file an income tax return, or it may arise out of the relationship between the parties, as the obligation of parents to provide their child with food. The mental element. Although most legal systems recognize the importance of the guilty mind, or mens rea, the statutes have not always spelled out exactly what is meant by this concept. Most crimes require a showing of purposely, knowingly, or recklessly. Negligent conduct will support a conviction only when the definition of the crime in question includes it.
Liability without mens rea. Some penal offenses do not require the demonstration of culpable mind on the part of the accused. These traditionally include statutory rape, in which knowledge that the child is below the age of consent is not necessary to liability. There is also a large class of public welfare offenses, involving such things as economic regulations or laws concerning public health and safety. The rationale for eliminating the mens rea requirement in such offenses is that to require the prosecution to establish the defendant's intent, or even negligence, would render such regulatory legislation largely ineffective and unenforceable. There has been considerable criticism of statutes that create liability without actual moral fault. To expose citizens to the condemnation of a criminal conviction without a showing of moral culpability raises issues of justice. In many instances, the objectives of such legislation can more effectively be achieved by civil sanctions, as, for example, suits for damages, injunctions, and the revocation of licenses. Ignorance and mistake. In most countries, the law recognizes that a person who acts in ignorance of the facts of his action should not be held criminally responsible. Thus, one who takes and carries away the goods of another person, believing them to be his own, does not commit larceny, for he lacks the intent to steal. Ignorance of the law, on the other hand, is generally held not to excuse the actor. It is no defense that he was unaware that his conduct was forbidden by criminal law. This doctrine is supported by the proposition that criminal acts may be recognized as harmful and immoral by any reasonable adult. The matter is not so clear, however, when the conduct is not obviously dangerous or immoral. A substantial body of opinion would permit mistakes of law to be asserted in defense of criminal charges in such cases, particularly when the defendant has in good faith made reasonable efforts to discover what the law is. Responsibility. It is universally agreed that in appropriate cases persons suffering from serious mental disorders should be relieved of the consequences of their criminal conduct. A great deal of controversy has arisen, however, as to the appropriate legal tests of responsibility. Most legal definitions of mental disorder are not based on modern concepts of medical science, and psychiatrists accordingly find it difficult to make their knowledge relevant to the requirements of the court. Mitigating circumstances and other defenses. The law generally recognizes a number of particular situations in which the use of force, even deadly force, is excused or justified. The most important body of law in this area is that which relates to self-defense. The use of force may also be excused if the defendant reasonably believed himself to be acting under necessity. Degrees of participation. One who commits the act with his own hand is a principal in the first degree. His counterpart is the auteur, or coautor, when two or more persons are directly engaged. A principal in the second degree is one who intentionally aids or abets the principal in the first degree, being present when the crime occurs. One who instigates, encourages, or counsels the principal without being present during the crime is called an accessory before the fact. This third degree of participation is covered partly by the concept of instigation and partly by the above-mentioned aid et assistance. The fourth and last degree of participation is that of accessory after the fact, who is punishable for receiving, concealing, or comforting one whom that person knows to have committed a crime so as to obstruct the criminal's apprehension or to otherwise obstruct justice. Conspiracy. Conspiracy is usually described as an agreement between two or more persons to commit an unlawful act or to accomplish a lawful end by unlawful means. This definition is delusively simple, however, for each of its terms has been the object of extended judicial exposition. In some jurisdictions, for example, the unlawful end of the conspiracy need not be one that would be criminal if accomplished by a single individual, but courts have not always agreed as to what constitutes an unlawful objective for these purposes. In most countries, the punishment of agreements to commit offenses, irrespective of whether the criminal purpose was attempted or executed, is largely confined to political offenses against the state. However, some extension of the conspiracy idea to other areas has occurred.